oh shit, this is going to take my jobs, because actually it might. With LLMs and agents replace about 80% of the work. And then the last 20% is really, really difficult. Who's responsible when it approves, someone buying a Bentley on the company card? And I actually saw a Reddit post where someone even said, everyone is building agentic AI, but most are just building agentic workflows. I honestly think that distinction is... So we're back here on the podcast. I want to talk a little bit about agents. Last time, we got around to AI, but AI's changed a ton. And from LLM applications now into agentic systems. I'm curious what you guys think of agents, where they fit. I don't even know what one is. I do, and I'll have an opinion. But how's an agent different from, what existed even 6 months ago?
Yeah, agents has become this buzzword, right? It's everyone's talking about agents. Agents is the hot new thing. You can kind of talk about, I don't know, I think it's just a fancy rebranding of software. When you actually think about agents, we can get kind of into it a little more, but what's the difference between an agent versus having just a piece of software that just works for you?
Well, there's a LLM involved.
There's an LLM, but can you just call any LLM an agent? What makes an LLM an agent?
What makes something agentic?
Yep.
Yeah. I liked what you said. I don't know, what you were saying, Austin, is it's just the LLM behind it, right? And I think it's very reductive to only say that an agent or an agentic system is just the LLM, right? It's powered by it, and the LLM is the abstraction, right? But the things that you can do with agents are why people are so excited about them, right? And I don't know, but it is kind of funny though, because you've heard some people say it's like a LLM on a for loop, right? It's just an iterating LLM. Yeah, I think about it a lot in the context of the types of software that we think of that's traditional, right? So if you compare old school software with the software that we're all used to.
Old school software.
Old school from 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but software, the way that we build software is deterministic, right? So you know your inputs and you know your outputs, and it's expected,
yeah.
Right? But, agents and agentic systems, because they're powered by this incredibly powerful probability and statistical model, actually don't necessarily work in that deterministic way.
So to me, the difference between agentic and even the 6 month ago LLM, chat driven systems is tool calling. So agents have the ability to perform an action on external systems, either read or write. And so when I build an agent, that agent can, log into a system, assign a ticket to someone. It can search the internet. It can do things. It can interact with the world. And when LLMs were limited to just the training data that they had, and then whatever you could smash into the prompt, you ended up with fairly useful stuff to help, copywriting, email writing, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But they weren't able to truly automate human process. And when we think about where agents are going and what agents can do, or what an agent is, it's something that can actually automate a human process. So what is the human doing? They are, if I'm a customer service rep, I'm, picking a ticket up off a Zendesk, I'm assigning that to myself, I'm responding to some stuff, I'm submitting that back in, and then I'm reassigning that ticket to someone else. And agent is an LLM-powered application. So it uses all that humanistic nature of software that LLMs provide to interact with the world. And so
I think there's an important call out to make though. I think what people don't understand, while the agent can do all of those things, it does need, and I want to call out what you said about tools, right? So an agent, the LLM can hallucinate about just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there is a standard of reality that you need to enforce, tool calling helps with that. So
yeah,
I'll give an example. I built a D&D bot.
Right? Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, Dungeons and
What
Dragons
a nerd.
bot. Yeah, I'm a nerd. But the thing that I found when I'm trying to interact with this LLM and trying to tell a story, there's no consistency in the story. It doesn't know anything about the plot or the characters. It doesn't know anything about the sequence of events. But if you write tools for this thing to actually deterministically understand those, and it can reference back to them, and then you have memory and state, then all of a sudden it becomes a more predictable system.
Yeah, so memory, common tool, right? State,
Right.
common tool, database, common tool. There's less common tools. And then as I build agents for, my company, or we build them for some other company, everybody has kind of internal software that those agents have to integrate with. And so like that's what the difference, and I just want like people to lock in the difference between LLM application and agentic system. Agents interact with the world. LLMs, use training data to produce more text or audio or something like that. So that is and that's where like the power of these AIs is going.
Yep.
And why people are like, oh shit, like this is going to take my jobs, because actually it might. And I mean, we have a whole bunch of people. It's so funny. I was like selling into a insurance carrier, and as I'm like having conversations with them about what AIs they wanted to build or what agents they wanted to build, I have kept we were referring to humans, like the humans are customer service agents, and then we have AI customer service agents.
Right.
So there's almost like a litmus test for like where do we think AI is going to start automating people,
Right.
and it's the people we call agents
It's like
are
you're
probably
just an agent.
just going to get an AI right behind
Travel
them.
agents,
Trial
call center agents.
Call center agents, claims agents, like all that kind of stuff is like that's ripe for automation. And they're a really obvious place for us to go because they have a huge human element, and the LLMs are really good at being humanistic,
Right.
while they also need the tool calling and they need to be able to interact with the systems in order to work. I do think there's a way to start, and I want to talk a little bit about it because like people think of agents in a couple of ways. One is that they're completely ambient, like they just exist in your systems doing something, and the other is like a workflow. So I want to how do you start with an agent? Where do you think that workflow is? Let's talk a little bit about that.
So that's the point I wanted to kind of call out. What's the difference between an agent and a workflow? Because if you look at a workflow, it has a fixed number of steps, maybe with a couple of paths here and there, but they always end up in kind of the same resolution. It has a fixed, really, like you called, for loops, right? Agents are basically a for loops. Like, where does that end versus what you think of a truly agentic system that is open-ended, that can make decisions and kind of do things on its own? Like, where does that distinction lie?
I mean, we've had programming state. What you're talking about, and I think about a workflow in traditional software, is like a state machine, right? So I know I can like represent states and transition between states, and that actually is pretty powerful. And in some cases, it's all you need. But in the agentic flow, I think the differentiator is there has to be some decision that is made based on context, and then the flow can change. So like you can't really approximate an exact like call center workflow with a state machine.
I think we're going to talk about an article by Anthropic in a later episode, so smash like and subscribe.
Yes. Oh man, I'm glad you worked that one in.
All right. Not papaya yet, but so I don't want to dive like too deep into the article until we get there, but I do think like most jobs can be like represented as a workflow. I have a ticket, I get my next ticket, I respond to the ticket, and then I reassign it, or I, find some resolution to it, and then I move on to my next ticket. So like the easy place to start, and where I would, is look for those repetitive human processes, because like that repetitive knowledge work is like, it's akin to where manufacturing replaced, physical labor. What was the like repetitive process in the physical world? And we have, robotics do that kind of stuff, or, conveyor belts and, machinery replace the physical labor.
Right.
AI is now replacing the repetitive knowledge work.
It's raising the floor.
Yeah.
You're saying it's raising the floor.
Yeah.
Right?
Essentially, yeah.
Of the work.
Totally.
I think a lot of those repetitive tasks that are called knowledge work are really just things that people are used to identifying with. And I think if you really break down some of these repetitive tasks that you're doing, like, do you really want to make that part of your job? Like, I'm actually really ready to get rid of the repetitive tasks. I think we've said this before. Like, I never want to center a div on a screen ever again.
100%.
And I don't want
100%.
to have to build a button or something
Just
ever
use
again.
Flexbox. It's
Right.
like not that hard, guys.
It's pretty bad.
It's not that hard. You just use Flexbox. All right, so human problem. I want to add AI into my systems. Is it a human problem or is it an engineering problem?
So if you go back to what you kind of said, getting rid of the repeatable process, or look at what the process is. I mean, you think of from a UX perspective, the first thing that you do is map out the happy path, right? Like, what is the happy path to go from point A to point B to solve it? And then you look at all the edge cases. Oh, the system's going to break here, it's going to break there, and these are all the different paths that you can take to that. I mean, that's essentially what we're training an agent to do, right? Like, you train them on the happy path, but an agent is smart enough to know that, oh, this is for a customer service agent, for example, it's there's a type of ticket that needs maybe a human to come in and resolve it, or they need to reach out to another system, right? To be able to make those decisions is where I think the real power of an agent is, right? To come in. So I think it's a UX problem primarily. It's like an engineering problem. I think a lot of the tools that we have in place are powerful enough. I think we as an industry and as people working in technology haven't done a really good job of like connecting all of these things together. And I think that's where the power of an agent is. The agent is able to look at all these tools, and if the tool calls fail, if these connections fail, then we know that's where the gap is. But I think it's a fundamentally, I mean, humans are messy creatures, and our processes are messy. Tools are well defined, they're well scoped, right? I think it's, to me, I think it's like a fundamentally human problem.
I think all technical problems are fundamentally human problems. So, I mean, technology is essentially a tool we use to address problems, address challenges, but it's a UX problem. I mean, let's just think about like how rapid in the past 6 months, right? Have things come? Like, how far have things come in 6 freaking months? And like the amount of ability that an engineer or anybody has to interact with these systems it's incredible. It's mind blowing. People who had never even thought that they could produce software are actually able to do that.
Like me,
right? I'm not gonna knock you, Shahed. You're a sharp guy, but you haven't written a lot of software, right? But now you're like he's crunching code, dude. Like I see him like at 3 a.m. He's posting on Twitter or X about like, I just shipped this stuff. I'm like, I was in bed, dude. What are you talking about?
I was in bed too. I'm not burning that oil. We're kind of like bridging two gaps, because there's like agents that are like horizontal, right? And that's the agent that like it's a coding agent, right? So across all industries, across all, every coder can use a coding agent or non-coder.
Right.
But then there's vertical agents too, right? So that's, right. I want to build an agent that fits exactly into my systems, that replaces the human process or the tribal knowledge inside of my system or my team with something more automatic.
Yeah.
And I think that's like that's the buy versus build conversation I want to get into a little bit, because there's a bunch of agents out there. That we have, Salesforce, Agentforce kind of stuff. We have N8N. We have, LangChain just released their open agent platform. These types of things all come with like kind of building blocks to create autonomous systems. But then there's also like, how do I fit them into my world? But I don't want to get there yet. So hold your horses.
You don't need another tool. You need a system that actually helps. At Focused, we bring agentic intelligence to your stack. Learn how at focused.io.
We mentioned a pattern that is worth talking about, and that is like the human is still in the loop. So what's the expectation I should have when I start adding these automatic ambient agents into my workforce, almost as another employee, for it to replace my existing team?
I'm trying to think of examples of jobs from the past that no longer exist because you don't need that manual process anymore. That has been automated away. I think there's a similar thing that is happening here, where you have these I don't want to call it low level, but like it's almost I mean, robotics is a good example, right? Like for making, when you're making cars, like you don't have people, like tons of people assembling cars anymore. The robotics are doing most of it. You have the human in the loop that's checking the work and making sure that that the quality, it's up to the quality that's been defined. I don't think the humans are, you can ever take humans out of this process. You always need someone. You probably just don't need as many.
I don't know. Think about like the volume of tasks, right? So if there's how much is the business or the organization, like spending to keep up with volume? So like, I like this call center idea, right? So like, if you have a dedicated agent for a call center, right? I mean, the amount of volume that that thing can handle versus your human workforce is incredible,
Yeah.
right? And so you're still going to need your human agents to take these escalated paths where they do need to interface with a human. But on those pathways where that human is intervening, I would say that that's where you really could shine with like customer service and like really make that person happy on the line. And like, it probably does take a real special kind of case to go through. But if they're literally just asking like kind of a fundamental tier 1 question, like why would we put horsepower, like human power on that?
Mm-hmm.
And what human actually really wants to field those calls, because most of the time they're actually not super meaningful for the business or the humans involved, right?
Yeah, I think of it as like there's the 80% gap.
Right.
And so for repetitive job function, you can fairly simply, with LLMs and agents, replace about 80% of the work. And then the last 20% is really, really difficult.
Right.
It is it's the tribal knowledge. It's like, well, when I email Bill at this, at this place, he's really nice and kind of just approves whatever I do. That kind of stuff is really hard to codify, even for an LLM. And so I pull the human in to take that last 20%. And that human can actually fit into the agentic loop. So like the agent can do work, right? Agent goes off, does work, and then it says like, oh, we're hitting that kind of last 20% of the work, and I'm going to just ask a human to do it. But the nice thing is that 80% is still an incredible amount of time.
Right.
And so I can start to make people way faster.
Yeah.
I can make my teams way more efficient, but then I'm still pulling them in so I can increase volume, without increasing headcount, or I can, maintain the same volume with a smaller team. All right. So that brings us to a pretty interesting question. So say I'm building a finance agent that helps approve, deny expenses, right? If, Jill in accounting makes a mistake, we can go talk to Jill, train her, and she does, we fix it. So there's accountability to a human if they're doing all these things. What happens when agents start scaling and replacing the job of multiple humans, or doing the job of multiple humans? Who's responsible when it approves, someone buying a Bentley on the company card? Which happened at a place I worked one time.
An agent bought a Bentley.
An agent put a down payment on a Bentley. Not an agent.
Okay,
A person put a down payment on a Bentley on a company card.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, it's always going to be that arbitration, and that's where I think some people should take more solace and feel less existential dread about this. Like, you have to interact with these systems, which is why I think a lot of us, and we've said this before, interact with the systems, like understand the abstraction, engage with it, and start using it for your business, because those meaningful moments are the ones that you're going to have to intervene on. You can't just let these agents run wild. And then if you talk about at scale and at volume, right, you're going to have new systems that we haven't completely defined yet to manage and maintain those things.
But then who's, again, to Austin's point, who is responsible? Like if something does go off the rails or something goes wrong.
Until I can start suing an agent, I guess the people are going to be responsible, right? So, yeah. So, I don't know. Maybe if an agent swarm incorporates itself, you might have some legal action against them. But you're going to be, it's going to be the entity.
Well, I think what I'm trying to get at is not like the corporation.
Right.
It's more like if I have an employee or a team member who makes a mistake, like there's, you have a conversation, you show them the mistake, you help them get better, whatever it is. And if they keep making mistakes, then you find a different employee, right? With an agent, now all of a sudden there's not a person to blame. And
but you would train the agent, and you would or
train.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, You would train the agent, you would remediate that, you would extend the agent's capabilities. It's probably a lot more like managing people than we're actually ready for.
Yep. Can put the agent on a pip, right? And this,
So I actually think that's an interesting point because agents are held to a higher standard than people. Like this is actually a really easy thing for us to talk about. Like if someone in accounting approves an expense that shouldn't be approved, like what do? Oh, we have checks and balances. Like, but if I have an AI that approves an expense that shouldn't be approved, like then that AI needs to be turned off or it needs to be, it can't work. Agents, when you build these things, they're held to higher standards and there's scaffolding we can put in to make sure that the agents that we are building are actually delivering like at the high standard that is required of them. Things like evals, observability, that kind of stuff put in from the very beginning allow us to know what's going on. And then you don't just train the agent. Like train is a loaded term too, because like in an LLM's world, it could mean, foundational training, it could mean fine tuning, or it could mean prompt engineering. But it is like actually what it would do is like if an agent approves an expense, the same way when I go into software and I find a bug, if an agent approves an expense that it shouldn't have, I would go write an eval to try to figure out why that agent did. I watch that eval fail, and then I would go iterate on the prompt until that, agent denied the expense appropriately. And so like there is path for this. The agent gets blamed, but I think turning these things off or holding them to a high standard is just the reality of the systems we're building. And so as we add these into systems, or as someone, I'm a dev or an engineering manager wants to add an agent into their company, know that the second that this thing makes a mistake, it's going to take the hot seat way faster than if I were to have hired, if I have an AI agent that's managing my social media comments and it starts going off the rails, it's going to get a lot more scrutiny, or the comments are just like, maybe it's not even off the rails. The comments are just bad, like not relevant or something like that. It's going to get a lot more scrutiny than if I hired a social media intern to do it.
I totally agree with your point. I think what you're saying, though, is interesting. I think that there is so much excitement and anticipation on like what these agents can do, and people are putting them in places that are critical paths, and they're testing them in the actual wild with like high level consequences, right? Yeah. And so you're right, there are protections against that, but I think the other side of that coin is when I introduce an agent, actually, how can I like change my organization to embrace it and then not put that thing in the hot seat? It's like you're saying, if I hire an engineer and they're very early in their career and they take down production, like, okay, maybe part of that was they're not ready to be on call, right? And so I need to work with them to understand that. So yeah. I'm drawing the parallel between what you said, like eval, observability, the way that you manage and maintain the agent systems, but also until you're ready, right? You need to have experimentation and growth in like the capabilities of the agent instead of just throwing it and being like, okay, this is our new social media presence. It's an agent, and we've never done this before.
So that's the process then. You human in the loop, and you start with more human in the loop.
Yep.
And as you watch the human in the loop, which is informing the agent, memory is getting added, prompt is getting iterated on, evals are getting driven out. And then as the human starts to approve more and more, and this agent starts doing more and more, you remove human in the loop. So when I start with an agent, lots of human in the loop. And then over the course of time, that human slowly, gets removed from the loop and is doing larger and larger checks.
But you're not just going to drop an agent in without all that effort and work and expect to get great results.
Yeah, and when we do these agent builds, like the coolest thing about it, actually not cool, the hardest thing about it during the sales cycle and the build cycle is having a conversation with our customers saying, hey, a huge part of the work is actually in the like prompt engineering, eval portion. And so where when we were building apps, you're seeing coders write code all day. Now they're like, nitpicking spacing and a prompt and building evals around that. And it feels a lot less productive, but that's actually the brain of the system of this agent is that. And then we're adding the human in the loop so the human can then reinforce and reinform the agent on what it should or shouldn't be doing better.
So is it shift in thinking then? So we're not selling software, we're not selling, we're going to introduce this piece of software, it's going to make your lives better. It's more about, hey, you're actually hiring someone. Just think about it like that. You're hiring
right.
someone and you're training them. and eventually you train them, and then they get good enough to replace whatever system or human that you're not completely replace, but take over the majority of the tasks that this human is supposed to do. So maybe it's that, right? Because the expectation is, oh, you're going to write some software for us. We're going to see lines of code. We're going to see velocity. We're going to see all of these traditional metrics that you kind of associate with software engineering, versus now you're looking at you're training this agent, and you're looking at how it performs.
Yeah, there's something there. Like, actually, we see a lot of customers name their agents, and they get and they're even like they get human roles in systems because those systems don't have
personas.
And they don't have like, say I'm like I have a loyalty points management system or something like that, and it doesn't have a good API. An AI agent actually gets a human role, logs in like a human, uses the browser like a human, and then all of its actions are audited the same way, Kevin, the other, the human customer service person who's doing loyalty points management, does his work and is audited. So, all right, so when I'm building these agents, I've decided I want to do something. I'm an engineering manager. I have a ton of questions. And this comes up for me in conversations like every couple days. So the first is buy or build. And so we talked about it a little bit in the beginning. I don't know if they'll cut it in, but you have a bunch of kind of buy and levels of buy. There's like, I can just buy an agent that someone already built that's a SaaS. I can buy like a agent workflow tool like an N8N or Agentforce or something like that. Or I can build something, direct integration into OpenAI, kind of thing. So how do you make that decision, buy or build?
I'm going to be the grumpy old guy in the room. I think the question about build or buy is really one about security and essentially how much access to critical data does this thing need to have to function?
Okay.
So essentially, if you are you should build an agent if you're trying to protect a specific moat that your organization has, or if you're worried about secure access, or if you're like very if it's tightly coupled with like a really critical business operation. I think buy when you actually need to have like a tool to get a task done that maybe exfiltrates or like interfaces with like a third party tool, and you're using it like that anyway, right? That's kind of my delineation between the two. I think those are pretty good heuristics.
But I think eventually everyone's will go towards build, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're talking about a truly agentic system or a true agents, they're non-deterministic, and they have to map to how a human behaves. And the human process, like, you can get pretty close with out-of-the-box software, but not completely quite there, right? That being said, I think everyone should, at least in the beginning, just buy. Like, just try it out. I mean, the whole point here is to get people excited about agents, to use them, see what's possible, and then you get towards build. So I'm in both. Like, you want to try it out? Yes, definitely buy for now, build later.
There's like a maturity of like how you get into the buy build. So people start with ChatGPT and they're automating small parts of their knowledge work, whether it's research or copywriting or emails or whatever it is. They're, report writing. So people start with ChatGPT and they're like, okay, ChatGPT can't do it because I'm like pasting too much shit in here. So then they like look for, or I want something that's a little bit more automatic. So I want to like not copy paste into ChatGPT. Then I think people move to tools like N8N, sponsor us. They move into tools like N8N, and N8N you can stop there actually if the work that you're trying to automate and you need an LLM for is horizontal. So meaning it's not specific to your business and your industry. So if I'm doing like research over social media, viral social media posts, and then I'm going to try and like kind of catch the wave with our social media posts as well, kind of thing. That type of work tends to be really, really good for these like kind of buy agents. And N8N's cool because you can like drag and drop kind of different modules together. So it's not, it's not just does one thing well. It can kind of do a lot of things if you can connect the boxes correctly. And and then it stops there. Where build really comes in then is if I have something, and I think the security thing, I know that's your thing, but like I think the security thing you solve with like a contract. So like I can feed information into.
If only that actually worked in the real world.
I mean, all of our email and all of our documents and everything's in Google. Like we give a lot of information to third parties already, so I'm not as concerned about the security stuff. I think, deciding where and how that fits in your org is fine, but it's not what I would make the decision based on. I'd make it based on like what do I need this agent to do, and is it horizontal or is it deeply vertical? If it's deeply vertical, meaning it integrates tightly with my existing systems that are not common. So I'm not integrating with a public API like Twilio. I'm integrating with an internal API that, is my address and order management system, right? Then all of a sudden I get into the build conversation. And then I need to start actually building like agents inside of my org that can do things, and then they're deployed and run just like software.
I mean, don't build a coding agent, so you should definitely buy one of those.
Yeah, that's kind of my point. Like coding is a horizontal task,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Social media posting, horizontal task. Copywriting, horizontal task.
Sure.
Like these types of things are really horizontal, but like claims remediation at an insurance company is not deeply horizontal, right?
Well, it's the end. It's vertical, right? So horizontal isn't deep.
Right, yeah, I guess widely horizontal.
There you go.
So, like claims remediation is vertical, right? And the process in which my organization remediates claims is actually very, is like very vertical. It's like, what are our policies? What do we approve? What do we deny? How do we handle customer support around these things? What's the escalation path? That all really matters. And then what are the systems in which like the claims remediation interact with? So, I have a claim submitted. I, have emails and phone calls that have to get logged. I have a payout system, all these types of things in an insurance, like that's vertical. That's a build.
I think it's interesting, though, that you don't have a concern with the security stuff, but what you're advocating for is like a really deep automated decision maker in the most critical paths of business. And we're going to provide some third party this data.
Well, you're putting words in my mouth. I don't think that the decision to buy or build is based on security, but I do think like, of course, these things have to be like, you have to think about security and observability and all these other things, just like you would with any software.
That's what I wanted to hear you say. That's all I wanted to hear you say.
Yeah, or any human. Like, I'm not going to give unlimited access to all of my like level 1 customer support agent, customer support people, so they can like go change balances inside of my, inside of my bank. No, they can maybe see like very basic information that escalates up to people who have higher and higher security tiers. AI gets the same treatment as them.
Again, it's another human attribute that we're assigning to agents as well, right?
Yes.
The level of access, or
I mean, access to information, of course, like, but I think that people don't understand it's very easy to think in the context of, I have a new employee, right? Maybe they're on like a 3-month probationary period. Maybe we have different policies for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just rattle those things off. With agents, so we have to like remember that this is new. And so people are going to make mistakes where they are probably giving the keys over to something very quickly. And I do think that should be a pretty big factor in whether you build or buy, because if you're building it, you assume a lot of responsibility, right, internally for that stuff. If you're buying it, what you don't know is what that data is being used for and egress.
I think, you're just working your way up, right?
Right.
Start with chat, move to build, or move to buy, buy the agent, and then as soon as you feel like you could automate more, but that buy solution doesn't have it, then you're moving into build.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
Or if you can't automate what that buy solution is, you're moving into build.
Right.
Because it's, too domain specific, too internal, to something or other. So then I'm building. Then we get to the next question. When I build, so I've got an engineering team. When I build, do I direct integrate with my LLMs or do I abstract?
Yeah. I mean, you can just wrap an API call to your favorite LLM. And some people, I don't agree with them, would say that that's almost sufficient for an agent. I don't agree with that, but I've heard it, right? especially the naysayers, right? They're
But
like,
even like OpenAI has like an agent API.
sure.
And they can like perform work. They have tool calling. You know, so does Google. So does Anthropic.
That's right. Oh, we have MCP, we have
Right.
A protocol. Like, there's all kinds of wrappers on these things that we can do.
Right. And so like the real question is like, do I use a LangChain abstraction layer to like hide away the direct integrations with the LLMs and the providers, or do I integrate with those providers directly? And how do I make that decision?
I mean, I think, of course, it depends on the use case, but essentially, I think as the deeper vertical integration that this agent needs, the more robust the implementation for the build needs to be.
Yeah.
And so in order to do the right thing for your business, you need to have a robust framework that allows you to do all that stuff you were talking about. Evaluate, observability, right?
Yep.
And so I would say if as you are going further in the journey, as your maturity and understanding of agentic systems grows, like you're gonna want to invest in like a LangGraph or a LangChain or something that is a framework for
Yeah,
them.
when I say LangChain, I always mean LangGraph.
Yeah, I know.
Like
they're
don't.
interchangeable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that that's important. Like I think you can have a variety of integrations or a variety of abstractions on working with these LLMs. I think right now, and you and I would probably agree on this, I think the best in class right now is LangGraph.
The holy war that used to exist is, of course, like ORM or write SQL.
Right.
So, like, man, you could put a handful of developers in a room and just like let them fight it out, and like no answer will be given. The same, I think it's actually a similar holy war. I would always. I like the abstraction layer. I like the ORM. You can always fall back into writing SQL when you use an ORM, and you can always fall back into a direct integration with an agent, a foundational model or a foundational API if you need to. The nice thing about the abstraction layer is like a ton of the work is done for you. So like you said, like the observability and instrumentation is done for me,
right?
Because it's like built into the LangGraph open source platform. If I want to test, Anthropic drops a new model, or Google drops a new model, or X just released Grok 4, and I want to see, and they're saying it's like phenomenal at tool calling, and I want to see if Grok can beat ChatGPT. If I have the abstraction already in place, I can swap those things, run my evals, and then see whether or not the new model performs better, because at the end of the day, these foundational models are commodities.
Yeah.
They all are, they're all converging on the exact same level of performance and the exact same kind of intelligence level. And they just have slight like nuance to them. Their personalities, what they refuse to answer versus will answer, how good they are at certain tool calls, that kind of stuff. And so being able to have portability inside of that is great. It's a similar to like when I have an ORM, I can, well, you don't really swap your database, but you could, right?
Yeah,
like I
the
can move.
abstraction works.
The abstraction works,
Yeah.
and then the other thing it allows me to do, and why I would use abstraction, is it allows me to bring people in more quickly. So if I have abstraction, then my new devs, as they're starting and working on this agent platform that I'm building out, or my agentic systems inside of my organization, all of a sudden they can go Google, how do I do this in LangGraph, right? How do I, build a conditional node? How do I make a node loop? How do I make parallelization? Well, how do I do a map reduce? It's all there. And if I've done direct integrations, and I can represent that exact same agent graph with direct integrations, but now all of a sudden that framework that I'm building is, specific and bespoke to my organization. And so the onboarding time, falls off climbs up a cliff, I guess. Like onboarding time is just like, it's really hard for people. Mm-hmm. And so like, if your developers, and while they still are an extremely expensive, extremely expensive staff, then I want to make them efficient. And one of the ways I can make them efficient is by using things that are Googleable. And then the nice thing is I can use a coding agent, if it's Googleable as well, to help me write more LangGraph, versus if I have it all kind of built in, my own company's domain, how am I going to use a coding agent to add a node?
It's funny how it's like a fundamental question that, it really hasn't changed, right? The build or buy thing. I think there's some particularities about agents that you want to think about. But I think in a lot of cases, people make the mistake that, it not built here or we'd have to buy it. Like, I think it's just really standard stuff. So you're talking about this abstraction and you're talking about the most bespoke thing that you build your own ORM in your own, you know what I mean? In your
Right.
own framework. Who the heck are you going to be able to bring onto the board to the team to actually help you run and operate and enhance that code base?
Totally.
Right. So it totally maps to how people make decisions.
I would start with the abstraction, and the cost of adding the abstraction, like a line graph, into a system is the fact that abstractions are abstract.
Right.
And so there is cost in the sense that you now no longer are directly if there's an error downstream or inside of the framework, or if the framework doesn't support a feature as quickly as OpenAI releases something kind of cool like embedded memory and I want to use that and LangGraph doesn't support it yet, I might lag. And the trade-offs on that, I think, are the trade-offs on the lag and the abstraction are worth accepting in order to have the portability and the common pattern that come with using that abstraction. So I'd almost always use it. So escalating through, it's like going from my N8N automation that I built out or at Agent Force automation or whatever it is, I'd start to build LangGraph, LangGraph agents that can really do the things that are specific to my business, and I would have those things, running, observed, and operating inside of my stack, just like I would a standard web service.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because I think the carrying cost of some of these abstractions gets reduced when code becomes less valuable because we can throw things away a lot quicker now, right? So I have a really powerful agent that I can use to refactor a code base, right? Is the carrying cost for an abstraction that high? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, the opposite could be true too, is do I need an abstraction if I can generate 100% of my code and regenerate it? But I think the Google ability or the, chat ability of how to do something is still super valuable. And I'm not seeing a point in the, in the near-ish future where we're able to generate whole bespoke code bases. We still lean a lot on open source. We lean a lot on resources that are out there. And so using the resources that are out there allows people to move faster, allows us to get these agents out there faster, allows us to build better.
Well, and to be fair too, because a lot of the agentic stuff is new, the chatability of that is actually greatly reduced.
Yeah.
And so I think that the investment that a lot of folks are going to be making for their, these high-performing, highly paid employees, right? We're going to just start pivoting into building those machines now, right? The agents, because it's new ground. You can't tell an agent to be hey, design a tool calling LangGraph structure for this workflow. I've tried to do it, right? And
you can actually.
Well, it doesn't do a great job though. Not with the conventions of the things that you would expect from.
I'm going to call skill gap. You need to give it
we can fight about it, but no, actually, you're wrong.
You give it docs. It does fairly well.
It's okay. It's not great. All I'm saying though is that because these conventions are new and they're becoming more mission critical to the business, I think the LLMs will eventually catch up. But you're not going to just walk in and be build me an agent that can handle all my calls. I mean, we've talked about this. You have to model the actual workflow. You have to do all this. You know what I mean? The work.
Yeah, fair enough.
So that carrying cost might be different. Who knows?
Loving this conversation? Then show us some love. Scroll up on Spotify and tap that 5-star rating. It's quick, it's easy, and it helps us reach more people building the future. Thanks for listening.
All right, so we talked a little bit in the first segment about workflow versus agentic AI or autonomous agents. And I actually saw a Reddit post where someone even said, everyone is building agentic AI, but most are just building agentic workflows. I honestly think that distinction is bullshit. But I wanted to talk about it a little bit because it seems like a naysayer. So is a workflow an agent? Is an agent a workflow?
I mean, that's I don't even understand the distinction, frankly. I mean, the way in which that's so reductive, I think, I don't know. I'm just laughing. And I'm also thinking about in the post, he says something about lack of skills. And then Austin called me out for skill gap earlier.
Skill gap.
What the hell is going on?
And I just noticed that too. That was pretty funny. No, I think we're too early into this, and what we're looking at right now are just poor imitations of how we build software currently. I mean, we talk about workflows because that's what we know and that's what we're used to. I mean, these things are going to evolve, and yeah, a workflow versus an agent, they might be the same thing. Who cares, right? Like it's
Right.
it's more about, okay, let's start building on this stuff. Let's start experimenting with it. Eventually we'll evolve, we'll find out, we might diverge. Like we might find that, okay, yeah, this is a workflow, this is a pattern, versus something that is truly agentic, and that's an
I
agent.
guess I don't understand the difference. Like, what does truly agentic versus workflow even mean?
An example that I can see that comes to mind for me is like, okay, if you have a workflow, I mean, there's like tons of examples. Like there's a customer support ticket that has to be resolved in a certain way. It's a workflow. It has a certain number of steps.
Right.
That's how it's done. The most agentic thing I've seen is coding agents, because for those you give it a task. Let's say you want to center a div, right, on a page. That could be one step, or depending on what agent you use. I mean, that's just this bad example, but
Right.
I'm just saying, like, if you're developing a feature, you kind of give an outline to the agent saying that, hey, I need these features. I'm going to write it out like this. If you give it to, let's say, Gemini, or you give it to Claude, the number of steps it takes to complete that feature and implement it could be varied, right? And depending on how well you describe it or how many features you add to it. So to me, that is truly agentic, because it doesn't have like a set defined number of steps. Because yes, it'll give you an output, but even after that, it might not be exactly what you want. So you have, like, you follow it up with more prompts.
I think that there's an interesting distinction here, though, because like what you're calling out is, with these coding agents that you're talking about that are pretty agentic, how much really are we responsible as far as like prompting, understanding, intervening, editing, rejecting,
Mm-hmm.
accepting? And like when I think of like an agent workflow, what I'm really searching for, I think, is like that ambience where we had talked about, like, after a certain period of time, I've got this thing so dialed, it's like fielding a lot of the work, right? And so I think the two are kind of like oppositional to each other. But I also think it's hilarious though that somebody's like workflows aren't good enough for them. Like, what?
Yeah.
It solves a massive problem.
Nice.
It solves like a really massive inefficiency. And it's like you're not impressed that you can literally have like an agent take care of and scale.
They want agent to do everything for
Right.
you.
It's like,
So, like, the difference to you is agent, like, truly, autonomous agent, not workflow agent, is that it has like forking paths, and it doesn't do like one series of steps.
It's reactive, so it can sense what's happening with, let's say, with the environment, with the human, whatever is happening, it can kind of respond to it by itself without needing. I mean, I guess that's the definition of ambient agents. But what I'm thinking more of, it's not a predefined workflow. It can take paths by itself, to work on something.
yeah, I mean, I think ultimately though, like you can give an agent a set of tools and you can actually kind of prompt it to make its own decisions, right?
Yeah.
You can constrain it as much as you want, or you can let it run wild,
Hmm.
I think
right?
that, like, so you're just saying, like, there's a different, if the workflow is linear, it's less agentic.
I mean, I don't think so. I think at this point, like, we can call workflows and agents. I mean, there's a lot of overlap between the two. I mean, I guess we're calling everything agents right now, because partly it's also like a marketing buzzword, right? Like everyone's talking about agents, but I
Sure.
mean, it is a building block towards having agents, right? It's something. It's like a system that can, um, and it goes back to the conversation we had earlier about take any job title that has agent in it, like, customer service agent or whatnot. It's the jobs that you're doing are predefined. You could even define the human workflows as, or the human workflows as workflows.
Yeah.
So that's what an agent is taking over. So I
Yeah.
think it's fair to call it an agentic workflow.
I think you start almost always with a workflow,
Hmm.
right? And then the workflow gets branching paths, and it starts to feel more and more agentic, right? Because it, if the ticket deals with this, assign it to, or escalate it. If the ticket does this, then you remediate it. Like there's those branching paths get added in over time and through the discovery process of like what the humans do. But to me, most autonomous agents or ambient agents, they start with a workflow, and then you automatically kick them off. So they're popping something off a Kafka queue, or they're watching watching Redis, or they're looking at they're scanning a web page, or looking at an email inbox, like those types of things. And then they get more and more kind of autonomous as the human in the loop starts informing the agent how to like be better, and then it, agent does better, human does less, and then it's fully there.
Next episode, we're digging deep into building agents. We'll get into the details on what makes a great agent architecture, what tools, languages, and patterns your team needs to consider along the way, and what industry best practices are emerging in this new craft. Don't miss it.
Remember to respect the craft. Evolution doesn't require chaos, and teams will always beat heroes.